Jesus is risen. You guys, for 8 o'clock in the morning, are doing pretty good. That's good. That's good. We say Jesus is risen as a sign that indeed through his resurrection we have light and life. We have light and life. And that light and life, of course, is against the backdrop of the darkness and the dying that so recently we have talked about it and worked with here as God's people. In fact, if you look in our gospel reading, it starts with the darkness. Mary goes to the tomb, if you read, while it is still dark. She's going in the darkness, and I don't know about you, but every once in a while I get out there on a trail or something and it's dark. And when you're walking along in the darkness, you're mostly staring down. You're staring down because you don't want to trip on anything. There's rocks sticking up, or maybe there's some other obstacle there. So you're going along and you go moving pretty slowly, and you kind of keep looking up, though, because in the darkness you can't see very far. So you got to orient yourself so you're heading in the right direction. So you stay with the trail. That's in the physical darkness. So Mary had that kind of darkness. But I think the greater darkness for Mary is the fact that she had just suffered all this brutal stuff around Jesus. Traumatized, a word we often use in our modern world. She's traumatized. She watched Jesus and followed him along. She knew he was whipped, as much as she may not have seen that. But then they hauled him out, put that purple robe on top of the whippings, a bloodied purple robe at that point, and a crown of thorns on his head, and they mocked him as a king. Laughed at him. And they tried him unjustly, throwing charges at him, and the people cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And that's what they did. And she was there at the cross in John's gospel. Mary was at the cross while Jesus dies slowly, pulling on those nails. Darkness. It is in that setting, it's that situation that this light comes. In the darkness and in the dying. It's against that this light comes. And, for me, as I think about these things, it's like we need to start there. Because I know we want our world to be all wonderful. And at times it may be wonderful. I hope you're here in one of those wonderful times where it's all good. Kind of this frame we use, it's all good, And we get those, but it's often, there's a darkness to it, isn't there? There's a struggle, a trouble, there's cruelty and meanness, hard-heartedness, all those kinds of things around. But Jesus comes against that darkness. If it was all good and all light, it would be like me running up, I'll pick on Greg here, and handing him a flashlight on a sunny day, okay? So I give him a flashlight, it's a sunny day, and I say, "Hey, Greg, this is really going to help you, buddy." And he flicks that flashlight down, and he shows it around on the ground. He can barely see the beam, can he? I mean, he can't hardly tell that thing's on. It doesn't do him any good. What you'd rather have is sunglasses, thank you. It's really good out here. I could use a pair of sunglasses, not a flashlight. Jesus' light that he brings is against the darkness and the dying of this world. We need a light then in the darkness and in the dying of this world. Well, Mary goes to the tomb, of course, and the stone is rolled away, and she kind of freaks out. Things shouldn't move in the graveyard, right? Everybody agree with that? You go to the graveyard and stuff's been moved around. That's gross. There's something just repulsive about that. And in that day, they really had a taboo about messing with the body. It was a big deal. They treated it with great honor, so that's why they wrapped it, and they brought all the spices and things like that, because the body was in such honor. And so Mary is taking this as another sign of humiliation, of cruelty, of just what they were doing to Jesus, and they just don't even stop when he's dead. And that trauma is just had to be uppermost for her. So she just runs back to tell the disciples, the stone's away, and she tells them, "I don't know what they've done with their Lord. I don't know where they've taken him," that kind of thing. And reports to them. And the two disciples, of course, come running back to the grave. To the tomb. And John gets there first. It says the other disciple in John. It always says the other disciple. We don't know who that is for sure because it never tells us, but we assume it's John, okay? That's just where we go. We assume it's John. So John gets there first. He peeks in. Of course, Peter gets there, and as Peter is, he just goes straight in the tomb, right? He doesn't just peek. He goes, "I'm going in here," So he's in there, and he sees the linens lying there, and he sees the roll of the other linen all rolled up by his head, so some care taken there, actually. So the stone is removed, there's the linens, one of them folded up, apparently, and they leave the tomb. They leave the tomb, and pretty soon we have Mary standing there. So Mary's standing there again, and those guys are apparently gone, and she's just weeping. And now she looks back into the tomb and sees what we describe as angels. Angels, the word in Greek, angels, is just messenger. Now, in our modern world, I know we have angels, we think of wings, don't you? I mean, you think of big wings, almost a glowing creature with wings. But that isn't the biblical. It's just messengers or angels would just look like people. So she sees these two people in there that are messengers. Can I say that? Two persons in there that are messengers. And they ask her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she responds, "They've taken my Lord again. I don't know where they have laid him." So she's fighting with this whole thing too. And I want to stop there right at that point. I think it's an important place to stop and pause. And the reason for that is, up to this point of the story, I think experientially we can relate. Because what she's got is two messengers telling her, hinting to her what's going on, and some clues. And that's pretty much, in my experience, what you and I get. The rest of the story, that's beyond my experience. I never met a risen Jesus, had him call my name in my face. I don't know about you, but I haven't gone. The rest of the story is beyond what I get. I get this part. That's where I've been in my life, at least. Some hints, some glimpses, and clues. And clues are ambiguous. As we see with Mary, she could have interpreted the rolled away stone, or the disciples could read the grave cloths in multiple ways in terms of what has happened. It is not unassailable evidence or irrefutable proof. I know we'd rather have that, wouldn't we all? But we don't get that. What we get is some clues and some messengers. Let's think of my life. I find it a marvel that we even have life on this planet. Just knowing what we know about the universe, because most of the universe is freezing cold. I mean, it is like near absolute zero, hundreds of degrees below zero, space. Uninhabitable. That's 99% of everything, all right? And the other percent is like suns. So it's blazing hot, tens and thousands of degrees hot. And yet here we are in this world with this little narrow temperature band that's just right. And we've been that way forever. And besides that, we have this atmosphere of oxygen and nitrogen that protects and lets us breathe. And we have water, and we have all the right chemistry in our soils and everything that's not too toxic or anything, that we have life. And I say, well, that's a clue. It's not irrefutable evidence. There's several ways you can take it, isn't there? Ways you could describe that. And the same thing with my own experience of life. A lot of things have worked out for me. At times, I get a run of things. And that's not irrefutable evidence either. You could say, Pastor, that was just a run of good luck. Or I could say, sometimes it just seems like, for some reason, I know that God's with me in this thing. That God's there. Or is it a run of good luck, a random set of events? I mean, we have to interpret the clues. And we have messengers. I think of the two people in the tomb, the messengers in the tomb, like Christians down through the ages. Those voices that say, we have some experience. We know this guy is alive. That's the other thing we have. The voices of other people saying, I have some experience of that. I hear God's voice from it, this thing. I think of right after John and Peter go back, the little side comment in the Scripture is, as yet they did not understand the Scripture. That's the voices. It's not just they didn't understand reading the Bible, its history or something, but understood the Scripture as something that has spoken to them. Because I think that's when it comes alive. When you feel like something has spoken to you. And again, when someone else speaks it, it's not irrefutable proof. It may get traction and bring to faith, and it might not. But that's what we get. We have clues, and we have messengers. And for some reason, that helps us kind of open ourselves up to there's something more here. There's something from beyond, from a spiritual realm, that speaks to us, that addresses us, that walks with us. So Mary is standing there in the garden again, weeping, thinking the gardener's there, asking him the question, but finally Jesus says to her, Mary. And in that moment, if you will, pow, She yells, Rabboni, which means teacher, okay? So she recognizes the lights come on. She has this life shoot up in her life. And she just comes alive again. You know, all this that I'm setting up really comes from the very earlier part of John's gospel. In fact, the first paragraph. If you remember the first paragraph, John's introduction, he says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. In him, it says, was life, and that life was light for people. Light for people. And that light, at the last of that paragraph, says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. I mean, this is the moment where that first paragraph just blows up, and we get it. Here is the light in the darkness, shining out into the darkness of our time. Here is this light, and it didn't get overcome. This is the proof of it. He is risen. It did not come over him. He is alive. All our lives, I believe we live with kind of this sense of a ticking clock in the back of our heads. We get so much life. We're mortals. And when we're younger, we can kind of blow it off. You know, people in Jesus' day, you know, the average lifespan in Jesus' day in the Roman Empire was less than 30. Now, I don't know about you, but if all of us over 30 stood up and walked out of here, it'd thin it out pretty good. They knew in the ancient world the clock was ticking. It was ever apparent in their lives. They didn't have these expanses of time where they could kind of say, yeah, it's not mine. I don't have to worry about this whole thing. But for us in the modern world, it's like it comes and goes a little bit. There's moments where it ticks loudly. It gets me thinking of that old Disney animated movie, Peter Pan. Now, in Peter Pan, there's this huge crocodile, and he swallowed a clock, a very loud ticking clock. Everybody remember it? Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. Anyway, in Peter Pan, this crocodile wanted to eat Captain Hook. He was after Captain Hook in particular. And Captain Hook would be off doing something, and pretty soon you'd hear this little tick, tock, tick, tock. It'd be getting louder, tick, tock, tick, tock. And Captain Hook would be getting nervous because he knew the crocodile was close and his end might be near. See, I think that's what you and I face often. Most of the time we don't think about it. We can't hear it. We don't hear that clock ticking in the background. But then something happens. Maybe it's a close call while we're driving. All of a sudden, tick, oh, yeah, I am mortal. I could have died right there. Or disease, similar kind of thing, huh? Where we get really sick and we made it somehow, and the tick-tock, tick-tock. One of the things I find, especially as I get older, is those decade birthdays. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Those even-numbered decade birthdays. Man, I don't know about you, but the clock's pretty loud on those birthdays. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It just comes voicing in. And maybe nowhere, most sadly and profoundly, do I know the clock's ticking than standing by the grave. Because as much as there's a ticking clock, few things remind us that it really, truly does come to an end. Is when we bury people. And then it's super loud. Because we know it's end. It's not just this thing over there ticking once in a while. It really does end, and our grief and our pain just get us. The clock ticks. Our lives come to an end. And there's a darkness and a dying that shows up with that whole experience. That's why this resurrection today is so powerfully important. Because this is the moment that says, hold it, the darkness got him. Some of the worst darkness we can imagine got Jesus, but he didn't overcome him. The light kept shining in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome him. This is the moment that we see that there is something more, that there's this light shining in the darkness, and if you will, through the darkness of even our death, still shining. And we have the clues out there that we have to look at. Not irrefutable evidence, not unassailable proof. We have the clues, and we have the voices of the people in the past speaking to us. That indeed this is the truth. This one is our sign that death does not have the last word. That there is a light shining in the darkness that the darkness did not overcome. So today is our celebration of that very fact. There's light and life in this world. And that it is, you've got to be ready for this, Jesus is risen.
He is risen indeed.
And so let us sing and stand and sing our hymn.